My name is Dr. Raoul McLaughlin, and my subject is the Roman economy, including trade beyond the imperial frontiers. I have published several books on this subject. I am a member of the Council of the Classical Association in Northern Ireland. The question is, did the Greeks inspire China's Terracotta Army? This theory has been promoted by the media, but it is not consistent with the evidence provided by archaeology and ancient sources. Records survive from ancient China, and these accounts reveal how and when the Chinese first established contact with the Greeks in Afghanistan. Ancient Greek and Persian civilization extended east as far as Sogdia in Central Asia, modern Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Sogdia was a remote agricultural territory that had been settled by people of Iranian culture. The region was captured by the Macedonian king Alexander when he conquered the Persian Empire in the 4th century BC. According to Strabo, Alexander and his successors established at least 8 Greek-style cities in Afghanistan and Sogdia. This could have included at least 40,000 Greco-Macedonian settlers as a ruling elite in strategic urban centres. In the 3rd century BC, the Greek governors of these distant territories declared independence and established an autonomous Greek realm in Afghanistan and Sogdia. Sogdia lay between the Oxus and the Jaraxus river systems, which flowed northward into the landlocked Aral Sea. Routes to the east led into the fertile Fergana Valley, which terminated in the Pamir Mountains. The Pamirs are high enough to induce altitude sickness, and were considered to be the very edge of the known world, as they merged into the unexplored and largely inaccessible Himalayas. In the centre of Asia, between the Himalayas and the Tan Shan mountain range, is a 1,000-mile-long depression known as the Tarim Basin. The western part of the Tarim Basin is filled by a sandy desert known as the Taklamakan, where red grit particles are heaped into vast shifting dune fields. The eastern part of this depression opens into desiccated salt flats that poison watercourses and kill essential crops. Beyond the Tarim Basin was the Arid Hex corridor, a belt of minimal shrubland situated between the immense Tibetan Plateau and the formidable Gobi Desert. This strategic passageway led 600 miles east to the edge of ancient China. Another route for contact was the vast Eurasian steppe, a seemingly endless expanse of arid grassland occupied by mounted nomads who managed large herds of grazing animals. These warlike people fought on horseback, carrying short, powerful bows that they could shoot from the saddle. Steppe nations were highly territorial, but they regularly travelled hundreds of miles between seasonal pastures. This was significant because the steppe extended north of the Tian Mountains into Mongolia and grassland territories bordering northern China. Steppe peoples from Central Asia crossed through passes in the Tian Mountains to trade with small settled communities on the edge of the Tarim Basin. Consequently, these sparse Tarim populations had a mixture of Europoid and Asian features. Confirmation comes from ancient burials at Loyan and Chirchin in the southern Tarim territories. The burials contain human remains that have been naturally mummified by the extreme desert climate. Although these remains are thousands of years old, their natural skin coloration and hair pigmentation has been preserved. This confirms that they were tall individuals with angular faces and fair, brown or reddish hair coloration. European people probably migrated into the Tarim Basin from the Russian steppe during the 3rd millennium BC. This particular population was still prominent during the Roman imperial era, when the Latin writer Pliny the Elder describes tall Europoids in the Far East, known to classical civilization as the Seres. Pliny reports, "The Seres are above normal height. Their hair is golden red. Their eyes are blue. The sound of their voices is rough, and they exchange no words with merchants. Most populations on the open steppe followed north-south migratory courses, as this was the direction of the main river valleys in Central Asia. Travellers heading from east to west would have to cross a series of disputed steppe territories and confront aggressive peoples opposed to foreign intrusion. The distances between Sogdia and China were so vast that these intervening civilizations did not establish any meaningful direct contacts until the rise of new empires that could command unprecedented populations and unparalleled resources. The Unification of China. In the 3rd century BC, China was divided into 5 regional kingdoms, including the large and powerful state of Qin, which controlled western territories leading to the Hexe corridor and the Central Asian steppe. Between 230 and 221 BC, the Qin ruler, Shi Huang, conquered his rivals and was proclaimed the first emperor of a unified China. The emperor began far-reaching political reforms and ordered mass state projects to unify the northern defense works of China into a connected barrier known as the Great Wall. The Great Wall guarded the transitional territories between semi-wilderness steppe and the agricultural areas settled by Chinese populations. The network of garrison forts, outposts, watchtowers, and signalling stations stretched more than 3,100 miles across the northern borders of the Chinese Empire, from the Korean peninsula to the western edge of the Ordos Desert. During this period, the steppe was strategically important because Chinese territory was not well suited for breeding and raising horses. The Qin military therefore relied on a steppe people called the Yueshi to provide them with mounts for cavalry forces. The Yueshi occupied the Hexe corridor and grazed their abundant livestock on the northern foothills of the Tanshan Mountains. To guarantee a continual supply of cavalry horses, the Qin offered unique silk products to the Yueshi in return for their livestock. This trade was so important that the emperor granted Chinese titles to Lu, the leader of the Yueshi. The Chinese historian Sima Qian reports that the first Qin emperor showed his appreciation by granting Lu a position with the same rank as the highest ministers in the court. Yueshi envoys and representatives of other steppe nations entered Chinese territory through a military outpost on the western edge of the Great Wall, known as Lin Tao, far west. To impress his subjects and intimidate these foreign visitors, the emperor had giant statues placed at Lin Tao, depicting men from various foreign countries kneeling in submission to the Chinese. The Han Histories report, in the 26th year of the emperor, 221 BC, there were displayed in Lin Tao the semblance of Daren, large men. There were 12 of them, 5 sang tall, with feet the size of 6 chi, all dressed in foreign robes. If these measurements are correct, then each of the seated figures was probably 50 foot tall. The number 12 was significant, as it represented the number of lunar months in a year, and the 12 degrees of direction, as outlined in Chinese cosmography. The foreign robes could describe the loose-fitting riding gear worn by many steppe nations, including the Yueshi. The emperor ordered the construction of 12 similar monumental statues near the imperial palace. He had captured weaponry melted down and reshaped into 30-foot-tall bronze images to confirm his authority over foreign peoples. The creation of these giant seated figures involved traditional metalworking technology used to fashion the bell and gong stands popular in ancient Chinese culture. The Han Histories report that the emperor collected the weapons of all under heaven in the capital and cast them into 12 bronze figures with bell stands, each 1,000 shi, 60 tons, in weight, and he displayed them in the palace. These giant statues of supplicant foreign peoples are mentioned in later Chinese accounts. It was said that when the usurper, Wang Man, seized the imperial throne, he had a prophetic vision involving the statues. The Han histories report that the usurper dreamt that 5 of the bronze men in the palace stood up. He hated this, considering that the bronze men bore the inscriptions, "The emperor, for the first time, united all under heaven." The dream thus predicted that the nations to the west of China would not accept Wang Man's rule, and his reign subsequently provoked a destructive civil war. In the 4th century AD, the last of the giant statue was eventually melted down for coinage, and no known smaller replicas have survived. The Terracotta Army. The best insight into the material culture and political scope of early imperial China comes from the tomb of the first emperor. The Chinese histories describe how the emperor is entombed beneath an artificial hill known as Mount Li. According to ancient Chinese histories, the mound covers a replica palace, complete with towers, treasure stores, and audience chambers. Sima Qian reports that before the inner chambers were sealed, craftsmen were instructed to make automatic crossbows, primed to shoot at intruders. He describes the central audience room of the palace tomb, which had a celestial chart painted onto the ceiling, and a relief map on the floor that depicts the entire world known to early China. Miniature mountains were sculpted into the raised map, and pools of liquid mercury were poured into the depressions to give the illusion of flowing rivers, lakes, and seas. This burial mound has not been excavated, but there may be some truth in the ancient accounts, as modern analysis of soil samples from the site reveal high levels of mercury pollution. The first emperor is also famous for constructing a complex near his tomb, containing 8,000 life-sized replica individuals made of terracotta. The Terracotta Army were probably intended to be spirit guards to protect the emperor from vengeful entities in the afterlife. Their barracks are arranged facing eastward, towards the Chinese kingdoms that Qin Shi Huang had conquered to unify China. Each figure in his army was originally painted in lifelike colors, but the pigment has degraded after millennia entombed in the earth. Some figures have hands poised to hold actual weapons, including crossbows, but military gear was looted from the site in the civil war that followed the death of the first emperor. Compared with Greek sculpture, the Chinese terracotta figures have a very different purpose and method of manufacture. Greek sculpture involved the highly skilled technique of chiseling and carving lifelike representations of humans and animals out of marble blocks. These were displayed for public viewing and religious veneration in prominent civic spaces. By contrast, the hollow terracotta figures produced by the Qin were made using Chinese mass production methods developed to manufacture ceramic drainage pipes from clay. The warriors were cast in parts, fired in large furnaces, then assembled by semi-skilled work teams before any surface details were attached. The workshop stamps and decorative motifs on the terracotta figures are Chinese, and there is no evidence of any foreign techniques, scripts, or art styles among the excavated remains. The emperor followed traditional practices when he ordered the construction of these tomb guardians. It was an established custom for small clay figurines to be included in the burial offerings provided for Chinese dignitaries. These small token objects were intended to represent the real-world attendees who served the official during his life. However, the first emperor chose to demonstrate his status by enacting Chinese custom on a larger scale, so he had life-size replicas placed in his tomb. Confirmation comes from other finds in the area, including terracotta copies of Chinese acrobats, designed to replicate the appearance of the court entertainers. Despite media speculation, there is currently no evidence that Greek sculptors influenced or assisted the Qin regime in constructing these life-sized pottery figures. For further information, subscribe to my channel and follow the link to my books, The Roman Empire and the Indian Ocean, and The Roman Empire and the Silk Routes. Thank you.